There we go. All right. How's it going, guys? Today we're covering, we're doing Bulletproof, Mastering Fear Like a Pilot. Real quick, let me get my pen squared away here. Through readiness and discipline, we are the masters of our fate, edge of tomorrow. Here's the battle plan. We'll start with an introduction like we always do. We'll get into fear, defining fear and how to confront it. We're going to cover some emergency procedures, radio failures, electrical failure, engine failure, stall spins, engine fire, and we'll conclude and have a Q&A at the end. If you have any questions at any point, just go ahead and shout them out and we'll get it done. Cool. All right, introduction. If you guys don't know who I am, my name is Monty. I am a former airborne ranger deployed twice with ACO 275. I'm a commercial pilot, ground instructor, advanced and instrument, and I'm a mechanical engineer. Got my degree at UW Bothell. I've been flying since 2015. Let's see. Oh yeah, some backstory. So I remember this one time, my flight instructor and I were flying this little guy right here, the Cessna 152, November 67991, specifically this aircraft. And we're on the downwind, and all of a sudden we lose our comms, completely lost, right? And we're trying to figure out what's going on. So, it's not technically an emergency to lose your communications, but in the class Delta, you definitely are supposed to have two-way radio communications to be able to enter the airspace. And so, we're in there on the downwind. Radios are gone. So, we do our thing. We squawk the emergency squawk code for radio failure. We get a beautiful big green light from the tower, and we land, no big issues. Amy calls up the tower to let them know, hey, we lost our radios mid-flight. And they're like, yeah, we figured. Go ahead and taxi to back to Northway. And we're good to go. It was super easy, barely an inconvenience. Well, a couple of years later, I was flying the same aircraft. I was trying to get my cross-country time done for my instrument rating. And as everything's great, beautiful day, really excited to get everything done. And I depart runway 34 left. And as I depart, the moment my wheels leave the ground, I just get a wall of static. It's like, I'm like, oh, are you serious? Anyway, so I'm going up. I figure, I'm trying to do a cross country to Bellingham. And if I can make it if I make it past Arlington and I haven't figured out this radio problem, I'm going to have to turn around and head home. And so, I've experienced it before, so I wasn't really stressed out about it. So I, troubleshooting, tried different things, unplugging the plug, switching it to a different plug, turning it off and on again, just the standard IT advice. And couldn't get it back online. It was a bummer. So I turned around, squawk 7600, and I got another big green light from the tower, and I was good to go and landed. And then I was escorted back to Northway by one of the airport security, and they're like, hey, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm good, dude, thanks. He's like, great, just making sure you're all right. I was like, thanks. Man, it was a bummer because I just spent $75 to do a trip up to Arlington and back and just lose my radio and didn't get to log it as cross country time. So it was a real bummer. Anyways, the point of that is to say that when you experience a real world emergency or a situation that isn't necessarily normal, it can help to have experienced it before, and it'll help you deal with your fear. Let's talk about fear. Fear is an unpleasant, often strong emotion caused by anticipation or awareness of danger. And a lot of people think fear is bad. Being afraid is a weakness. And that's not true. Fear is a biological response. It's good for us. Our bodies have developed, have evolved to alert us when something dangerous is happening. And so fear can be good. Some misconceptions about fear are that it is a weakness and that brave people don't feel fear and that fear is always a bad thing. And often people think that, oh man, I'm the only one dealing with fear. And that's just not true. Right? So today we're going to talk about how to confront fear and how it applies in aviation. So let's go back to one of my deployments, right? And you get a platoon of Rangers. They're on an objective, and they're doing their thing. If you have a platoon sergeant who is on the radio, is like, everybody, meet me in this room now. It's not gonna sound. It's gonna sound frantic. It's gonna sound like you don't know what's going on, and the rest of your platoon is going to think, oh shoot, something crazy is going on. But if you have a platoon sergeant that's like, Alpha team, I want you to meet me in this room, and then Bravo team, I want you to flex to the other room over there. And they're like, oh, cool. Platoon sergeant has everything under control, and we're good to go, right? So it's learning how to, control your fear so that other people around you aren't stressed out and then panicking. All right. A big part of fear is entering unknown situations, not sure what's going to happen. And so your mind is, going a million miles a second, thinking about, oh, shoot, this is going to happen or this is going to happen. And often we suffer more ahead of an event than we do actually in the event itself. And you'll get that shaky voice, that's super anxious, like, oh my gosh, right? And that's, you want to learn how to control it, right? And we want to develop, our pilot voice. And you guys have heard it. You'll hear your pilot come on the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Whatever, that kind of voice. It's good to have a calming presence. Actually, I love my designated pilot examiner, the DPE, the guy who does our check rides. He has the most calming presence you have ever seen. I remember I went for my commercial check ride, and I was freaking out because I was like 3 hours late because of ice, and it was crazy. And I get up there to Bellingham, and he's like, "Hey, Monty, we got all day. Don't worry about it." I was like, "Oh my God, I love you so much right now." And I was able to relax, and we're good to go. You want to develop that ability to appear unfazed, calm, right? And again, it helps keep others calm. It's not good to go into a situation where everybody's freaking out and then the leader to be freaking out because everyone else is going to be freaking out. So we have to learn how to calm ourselves. All right, so let's talk about conquering fear. One way that we do this is exposure therapy. And let's actually shift gears and talk about somebody who's afraid of spiders or something similar. If somebody's deathly afraid of spiders, you're not going to lock them in the room with a platoon of tarantulas on day one. Of course not. That'd be crazy. What we do is we slowly expose them to more and more fearful situations as they become more comfortable with it. So day one will be something like, here's a picture of a cartoon spider, and you expose them to it. They learn how to relax around it. And then day two might be, here's a picture of a less cartoony spider. And then you progress to, more and more scary situations. And then eventually you're like, all right, now here's a live spider, and it's not that bad. It's a little baby spider. And then you progress to the point where they can start petting a tarantula and recognize that it's not going to kill them. That's called exposure therapy. And so we want to do something similar in aviation, right? If a student pilot is particularly afraid of stalls, you're not going to throw them into doing loops and stalls and spins on day one. You're going to start them off with something easy, maybe just talking about stalls with our toy airplane, or just showing them on the simulator. And then you progress them to, through different scenarios until they become more comfortable with it. And then eventually they're like, sweet, yeah, I can do spins all day long. Too easy, right? Now let's talk about mindfulness. This is something you should be practicing in general, but it's a really good thing, a good way to help conquer your fear. Mindfulness is basically learning how to be present in the moment and being aware of your surroundings and being aware of what's going on in your own head. When I was, transitioning out of the Army, I took a lot of classes on mindfulness to deal with some of my issues and just learning how to, deal with that. And so first thing you want to do is be present, observe what's going on around you. All right, I'm here in this chair and I can feel my toes touching the ground, and I can feel my jacket, hugging my shoulders. I can feel the tension of my things, my headset, right? And just recognizing what's going on and labeling it, right? Label what you're experiencing so that you can start to separate yourself from your discomfort. And then you want to understand what it is that you're experiencing. For example, like I recognize I'm afraid of what's going on right now, or I'm really uncomfortable talking to a large group of people, and that's okay. I label that as fear, and then I can separate myself. I can, put that fear, put that thought with that label in a little boat and send it down the river, and we can, get more comfortable. And then actions, beliefs, and consequences. This is another concept in mindfulness where something happens and then you have to label what you believe about the situation. Like, all right, I saw this happen and now I think this is going to happen, and these are the consequences of what I think are going to happen. And then we have to accept or recognize when we are catastrophizing or thinking that things are worse than they actually are. And again, it's just practicing that mindfulness and learning how to label and separate ourselves from our thoughts. And then box breathing. This is one of my favorite ones. It's basically where you breathe in for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. And it's just learning how to calm yourself, right? Box breathing. Feels good. Okay. In general, people fall back on their training. People don't typically rise to an occasion for the most part. I mean, I'm generalizing here, of course. But we tend to fall back on our muscle memory. So when you expose somebody to a stressful situation, they tend to do what they've been trained to do. And if they haven't trained for the situation, it's unpredictable what they're going to do. They could seize up. They could do something completely irrational. I've seen people who, get freaked out in the aircraft and then they just tense up and they hold the controls and the flight instructor is sitting there trying to muscle it away from them. So we have to learn how to train ourselves to react to uncomfortable situations. Martial artists, we train certain moves to the point where we can do them without even thinking. When I was in the Army, we've practiced blocking. We literally practiced blocks for so long that one day I was walking down the barracks hallway and somebody popped out of a doorway to throw a punch, and I didn't register it. I just blocked it, and it was like, whoa, that was really cool. And they're like, wow, that's awesome, honey. Yeah. But it's that muscle memory, learning to deal with things and reacting correctly on instinct. In the Army, we have something called battle drills. A battle drill is a collective action rapidly executed without applying a deliberate decision-making process. What that means is there's some triggering event. For example, somebody opens fire on us. And then we recognize the situation, and then we say, all right, we're going to do this battle drill. And that battle drill might be like lay down a base of fire. The next team comes up and flanks. We shift fire. They bound through. LOA, these guys lift fire, and then these guys bound through an LOA. And everybody in the platoon knows how to do this battle drill because we've drilled it so much that we could do it in our sleep. And again, it's learning or practicing our skills until we can do them without having to consciously think about it. So we can focus our brain power on more pertinent things, right? So the other thing that we want to talk about is something from the Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth. I don't know if you guys have read that book. Love that book. It's by Colonel Chris Hadfield, a former astronaut. Sorry. There we go. That was weird. Okay, there we go. So in the book, An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth, he talks about how astronauts tend to attack problems. They don't go in all willy-nilly without thinking about things. They have a systematic approach to solving problems on space or in the space shuttle or on the space station. And he describes it as warn, gather, and work the problem. Warn. Before you charge headfirst into a fire, you want to warn the rest of your team. Wherever you are, unless you're on Mars, wherever you are, you have a team that you can rely on. That's you, ATC, your flight crew, whoever. You want to warn them, hey, there's a problem. There's a fire in the space station. Gather information about the problem. Is it an electrical fire? Is it something to do with, fuel or whatever? Gather information about the problem so you can make scientifically backed decisions on how to work the problem. And then you work the problem. You use your scientific method to attack the problem systematically. And then you're good to go. And hopefully you either solve the problem or you perish. So let's talk about emergency procedures and how we can apply that in aviation. By the way, if you guys have any questions throughout this, just go ahead and shout them out. All right. So the emergency procedures we're going to cover are going to progress in kind of this order. It's less intense to the most intense situations that you might experience. And they're all going to be, all the procedures are going to be in your pilot operating handbook. Every aircraft that we have, every general aviation aircraft has a pilot operating handbook that should live inside the cockpit that you can refer to in case of an emergency. And so I've got my checklist and I've got my pilot operating handbook somewhere over there. So I'll be using the checklist as a reference. And they're going to progress, radio failure is the least, dangerous, I guess. Electrical failure, engine failure, stalls and spins, and engine fire. And again, if you have questions, just shout them out. So radio failure. What might this look like? Right? If you're flying along and you're talking to ATC and all of a sudden you're either like me, you get a wall of static. You might be like, oh, shoot, something weird's going on. Warn. Step one. You might talk to your flight instructor or whoever else is in the aircraft, your flight crew, and be like, hey, I think we lost our radios. And then you're going to gather information about the problem. Did we lose our radios? How might we do that? We can contact ATC. Hey, Payne Tower, Cessna 38 Echo, radio check. And if they respond, yeah, we got you loud and clear, you're good to go. But if they don't respond, okay, that's evidence that the radio failed, that your radio has failed. And then gather information about it and then work the problem. And then we've got our checklist. You go through. You might unplug like I did. Try a different plug. Try a different radio frequency, and just work the problem. And if you can't get it back online, there are procedures that we have to follow. So first of all, we're going to squawk 7600 on our transponder. 7600 is our radio failure squawk code. There's 75, taken alive, we've been hijacked. 76, radio's nixed, our radio's dead. And 77, going to heaven, that's general emergency. And so we pick the one we need, 7600, and then we proceed to our landing point. And what we're going to do is we're going to observe the flow of traffic. You don't want to just barrel into the traffic pattern. You want to observe the flow of traffic. Let's say they're landing to the left and they're landing to the north, and it's left traffic. You're going to enter on the 45 for the left downwind. And a good practice is to continue making radio calls as if the radio was still functioning, because they might be receiving you, but you might not be receiving them. So 7600, we enter on the 45, and then continue with our landing sequence, and just land like normal. If you are landing at a towered airfield, you're going to be looking at the control tower for light gun signals, and green is what you want. Green means go. You can go ahead and land. Red means don't go. You don't land. And then flashing green and red is dangerous. There's a whole chart that you should have on your knee board. I have it on my knee board, so you can reference it as you're flying. Right. And again, radio failures really aren't that big of a deal. They're a bigger deal in the IFR world, but in VFR, it's not the end of the world. In fact, there are some airports that are non-towered, and you don't even need a radio. So not the end of the world. Again, stay calm, warn, gather, work the problem, run through your checklist, run through your flows, do the legally required thing, and land the plane. It'll be fine. Too easy.
Quick question.
Send it.
Because you mentioned the knee board. Are there like knee boards with already like pre with forms already written on it, kind of like what you're saying, like with the light gun signals and stuff like that? Things
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So there are knee boards that have cheat sheets like laser engraved onto them. So yes, absolutely. And then you can also have your own cheat sheets. I've got a three panel knee board where I keep some stuff, cheat sheets and crosswind charts and stuff like that. Yeah, good question. By the way, something to think about. A couple of things. In aviation, we actually have a very good track record in aviation as far as emergencies go. And the reason is because pilots, we train for emergencies all the time. Every time I would go up with my flight instructor, we would do an emergency at some point. When I run my ground school classes, like my actual ground school, like paid or whatever, the first thing we do is an emergency procedure. And I have the students stand up like, hey, talk me through an engine failure, talk me through a stall, talk me through a spin. We drill them to the point where they are second nature, so that when we are faced with an emergency, it's not the end of the world. And then our maintenance record, that's the other side of it. Our maintenance guys take care of our aircraft. We've got our annuals. Let's talk real quick. Sorry, kind of got sidetracked, but I think it's worth it. We have a whole list of inspections that we perform. We've got ADs, airworthiness directives. These are like your recalls from your manufacturer that say, hey, this aircraft needs this specific work done for it to be airworthy. So all the mechanics are going to pull it off the line, run through the maintenance, make sure it complies, and then put it back on the line. So recalls, essentially, airworthiness directives, VORs, every 30 days if you're flying IFR. So our VOR instruments, we test them literally every month just to make sure that they're functioning correctly. We have our inspections, and that is our Annual, so every 12 calendar months, your aircraft's going in for an annual inspection to make sure everything's functioning correctly. If it's for hire, then it's every 100 hours. We've got our altimeter. Our pitot-static system gets checked every 24 calendar months. Our transponder gets checked every 24 calendar months. Our emergency locator transmitter is 12 months or half the battery life or after 1 hour of continuous use. And then our pitot-static system, I already said that. But basically, the point is our aircraft are always being checked, double checked, making sure that everything is functioning correctly. So on top of our pilots constantly practicing for emergencies, we also have our maintenance dudes taking care of our aircraft. So we have it's a very safe hobby, a very safe industry because of the time and care that we put into it. Yeah. Anyway, so let's move on. So an electrical failure. What might this look like? So you might lose your radios. You might lose the ability to lower flaps. You might lose your ammeter might show something weird going on. You might lose your GPS unit, transponders. Basically all of your electronic stuff is going to fail, and that's probably what's going to happen. So let's think about it. Are we going to die? Probably not. Is a plane going to stop flying? Nope. Even if we lose an engine, it's still a glider. All right, so it's not the end of the world. We can stay calm and run through our checklist. All right, pull it up. Electrical failure. Where is it? That's electrical fire. Well, there's low voltage light. If there's a low voltage, turn off our avionics. Alternator circuit breaker, check in. Master switch off. Master switch on. Basically, cycle it to make sure it's functioning correctly. And if your electrical system isn't functioning, just turn off your master and then proceed to either a non-towered or a towered airfield. Do the same thing. Watch for the light gun signals, and you're good to go. Again, it goes back to that question I asked earlier, like, is this going to kill us? Probably not. And again, warn your team, check in with your co-pilot, your flight instructor, try to talk to ATC, get your team on the same page, gather information about it, use your checklist, work the problem. And if it doesn't work, or if you can't work the problem, then, land the plane. Too easy. Now let's talk about an engine failure. And I don't know why I have stalls and spins in here. Disregard these. An engine failure. This is going to be a bit more interesting. It's going to get your attention a bit faster. You might hear the engine become quieter. You'll see your tachometer go to zero or drop off. Your propeller's going to slow down, maybe even stop spinning. And what do you do? Same thing, before. Is this going to kill us? Not necessarily, not really. I mean, like Mitch Hedberg says, the aircraft is now a glider. Sorry for the convenience. And so warn, gather, work the problem. Warn, hey, flight instructor, I think we have an engine failure. Gather information real quick. The engine is not running. You're absolutely right. Work the problem. And in this case, our memory items are ABC. A, airspeed. Pitch for your best glide speed. So this is one of those things that you should know. In the Cessna 172, 65 knots. In the Cessna 150, I think it's 60 knots. Yep. And just trim it off. Literally, pull the nose, use your trim tab, take your hands off the controls, and you should be able to glide with your hands off the controls just fine. And you're good to go. You're going to glide it in. And then, so that's airspeed, best glide speed. B, best place to land. Now that you've got the aircraft trimmed, hands off, and you're chilling, you look around, find a field. There's a runway over there. There's a grass field over there. There's a golf course over there. Where are we going to land? Pick it, and then point your nose toward it and get set up for landing. And then C, bring out your checklist and start working the problem. And find engine failure during flight. Airspeed 60, landing site selected, fuel shuttle valve on. So look at your fuel shuttle valve, mixture full rich. Maybe you pull the mixture instead of the throttle. That's this red guy here. Carb heat on. So your carburetor heat is on. Ignition is switched to both. Crank the engine to see if we can get it started again. And then primer in and locked. And then if the engine doesn't come back online, we're in a glider. Too easy. And then we just glide down to land. Not the end of the world. Now let's talk about stalls and spins. First of all, let's talk about what a stall is. A stall is, a lot of people think that it's an engine failure. They're not the same thing. A stall is when you exceed the critical angle of attack and your wing stops generating lift. There is a point at which your wing and the relative wind are in such a great an angle that the airflow over here separates and you stop generating lift. That is a stall. And the answer to that, the fix for a stall, is just to nose over, push your nose down, reduce this angle of attack, and get airflow back over the wing. Literally the simplest thing in the world. Get your nose down and get some airflow over the wings. If you're in a landing configuration, you've got power out, put your throttle in, add power, get your nose down. It's actually interesting. When you're low to the ground, it can be a little uncomfortable to point your nose at the ground to get that airflow, but that's what you got to do. You got to put your nose down towards the ground, get some air over the wing, and get some lift generated again. Now, a spin is an aggravated stall with a yawing or a yawing motion, and we spiral down in a spin. We lose about 500 feet every 3 seconds. So a spin is a bit more hazardous, especially because the most common time to spin an aircraft is also the worst. If we are turning downwind base to turn final, this is the most common spot to spin an aircraft, accidentally spin it. That's because we are pilots in the past have overshot the runway and tried to get back onto final. And by doing so, first of all, they are slow because we're trying to land, and they do this in an uncoordinated fashion. That means that they're not using the rudder pedals correctly, and we've got some sort of yawing action happening when they spin or when they stall. And of course, if you stall the aircraft with some yaw in there, you're going to spin. And here, this turn here is done at 700 feet above the ground. So you have a little over 3 seconds to respond to this one. This is why spins close to the ground are further down the list. You've only got a handful of seconds to respond to a spin. I'm not going to ask. The response to a spin is pair. Power idle, ailerons neutral, rudder opposite, and elevator forward to break the stall. So power idle, we pull back on the throttle, we neutralize the aileron, so stick to the center. Rudder opposite. So if you're spinning to the left, you're going to put in right rudder, full right rudder. Get that foot all the way forward, and then push forward on the stick, nose forward to break that stall. And that's one of the most uncomfortable things for student pilots to do, is to get that nose pointed at the ground. Once you have stabilized the rotation and you have positive airflow going over the wing, then you can start generating lift again, and then you can recover from the nose down attitude. But you got to get that nose down, and it's uncomfortable. And the way we do it is, practice it. Go do it. Find a flight instructor who's comfortable doing spins up at altitude. Don't do this, close to the ground at 6,000 to 10,000 feet. Go up and do some spins and get comfortable putting your nose on the ground or pointing your nose to the ground. Anyways, that's stalls and spins. For stalls, get your nose down. For spins, pair, power idle, ailerons neutral, rudder opposite, elevator forward. Bam. And then the last one, engine fire. This one sucks. So what are the 3 things that a fire needs? Fire needs oxygen, heat, and fuel. And so actually, let's back up. What might you experience if there's an engine fire? Well, smoke. You might get some smoke in the cabin. You might see, flames coming out of the front of the aircraft. And then, warn, gather, work the problem. Warn, hey, flight instructor, co-pilot, ATC, I think I have an engine fire. And they'll confirm, yeah, it looks like it. Right? Warn, gather, let's verify. Smoke, flames, check. Yeah, we definitely have an engine fire. Work the problem. All right. Bam, engine fire in flight. Mixture, idle cut off. And that makes sense. We're literally pulling fuel out. We're starving the fire of fuel. Boom. Mixture out. Full fuel shutoff valve off. Kill the fuel. Again, starving the fire. Master switch off. Kill the electrical. Basically, you don't want any electricity flowing through. Master switch off. Cabin heat and air off. Airspeed greater than 85 knots in a 150. And we're going to try to, extinguish the flames. And where are we here? And force landing execute. You might do a steep an emergency descent where you will basically be at your VFE or maximum flap extended speed and then spiral down to the ground, trying to get, those flames extinguished and getting yourself to the ground as soon as possible. And we can practice these maneuvers. They're actually pretty fun to do. And then transition to slow flight right over the runway or the grass field and land the plane and save the passengers and be a hero. Again, this one is the most hazardous in my opinion because fire's no fun. This one and spins close to the ground are no fun to deal with. But again, if you're mentally prepared for it, if you go out with an instructor and drill it, you're going to come out of it better if you've experienced or simulated it or practiced it than if you experience it for the first time in the real world. And that's the point. Expose your therapy. Get yourself used to being uncomfortable. And then when the time comes for crazy stuff to go down, you'll be better prepared for it. Cool.
Is it required to have to practice those maneuvers to get your PPL?
There are some that are required. They're all laid out in the test standard. They'll say like what is required. But yeah, emergency procedures are required. You don't have to do spins for private pilot. You need to be aware of them, but you don't need to do them. Yeah, good question. Any other questions? Cool. All right, so let's review. Fear, it's a biological reaction. It's natural. It's okay. We talked about some techniques to overcome it, box breathing, exposure therapy, developing battle drills, and then, practicing your emergencies. A great way to practice these, by the way, are on the ground like we're doing right now. It's called chair flying. You'll pretend to be flying your airplane. You might even have a poster or a picture of your six-pack up. Right? And you'll be like, all right, I'm going to do engine fire. What do I expect to see? Smoke, flames, smell, engine fire. And then you just go through your flow. Use your checklist. Use my checklist. Use your checklist and then mentally go through your flow so that you can get that practice. You don't have to go out to the airplane and spend a bunch of money to practice these in your head. I mean, definitely do that. Go out and practice with an instructor, but you can also chair fly. And that's the same thing with maneuvers too. Anything in aviation, you should be chair flying on your days off. So yeah, that about covers it. Yeah, keeping it short today. Bam. Okay, so I hope you got something out of it. If you want to continue training on your own, you can do that lone wolf style, or if you want to work with an authorized instructor like me, you can do that. You can go to Emerald Squadron Aviation, go to the programs page, and we do offer one-on-one ground, $75 an hour. Pick a time slot and work with one of our instructors. You can also sign up for one of our courses. This is a video course. These are both live courses. They work on cohort model. And then we also have a subscription plan if you want to meet with us 3 times a week and then have daily accountability and assistance in setting up your home simulator and basically like just being part of the team. This is kind of like being on a flight team or a fire team and then having like a fire team leader to lead you. We have 3 times a week or once a week. And then we also have my books that I've written, Staying Grounded, Skyhawk Pilot. I'm really proud of these. If you guys want to buy them, they're on the website. They're also on Amazon. You can also get it at the website there. Bam. Now, time for Q&A and sketch. I will be sketching while you guys ask questions, and I'm more than happy to answer your questions.
Wait, did you say if you have an engine fire, you should enter a spin to drop altitude?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch it. You're coming in broken, man.
You said if you have an engine fire, you can enter a spin to drop your altitude and land.
Not a spin. It's actually called an emergency descent. An emergency descent is an emergency descent is a maneuver that we perform to get us down to the ground, but it's a controlled maneuver. So we'll enter a 45-degree bank. 45-degree bank will maintain VFE or maximum flap extended speed, and in this bank we're just going to spiral down until we are comfortable to get into slow flight and land. It's a controlled maneuver. It's not a spin. A spin is an uncontrolled aggravated stall. Here you're keeping your speed up. In a spin, you have stalled the aircraft, so your speed is low, and you have to recover from it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for asking. Good question.
Also another question is why is fire so dangerous? It just seems like an engine failure. If you extra steps because you just close your vents so you can get smoke in the cabin.
Yeah,
And then
you're asking.
Sorry, right?
Sorry, did you ask why a fire is so dangerous?
Why is it so much more? Why is it so much more dangerous? Like failure. It seems like
An engine.
it's just like an
engine failure.
Close
Yeah, an engine failure basically just you turn into a glider, which is actually really comfortable. If you've ever like just pulled the power back to idle, you can literally just glide the aircraft down. It's a very benign situation. In fact, I've heard of flight instructors who will pull the mixture on the aircraft and have their student just get comfortable flying the aircraft with no engine. I haven't done that myself. I mean, there's arguments to be made about whether or not that's really a safe thing to be doing in the real world. But engine failures are pretty benign. An engine fire, you could theoretically, get burnt yourself. You might have a wing fire, and that might be, a whole other problem. So personally, I think engine fires are a bigger deal than engine failures. I guess that's my opinion. I don't know what the FAA says is more dangerous or more hazardous.
So you kind of mentioned something earlier about like how people often get into stalls, like you would overshoot the runway on your base to final turn, and you would like not apply the right amount of rudder on the way in. Actually, today I was practicing on sim, and that was something I was doing very often. So I was trying to see I guess are there any kind of like tips as far as like should you just do a go around if you are to like overshoot the runway, or are there like ways to guarantee to correct that?
Yeah. So first of all, go around should be a very comfortable, like normal part of your procedures. Go arounds. A lot of people think like, oh, a go around, I failed to land. Like that. Go arounds should be a good thing. You should be practicing them. A good way to line up correctly is like make eye contact with the runway. And that's kind of one of the problems with like home simulators. You don't have the ability to really turn your head. So it can become very difficult to make that turn to final in the simulator. I found that it's actually easier to do it in the real world than it is on a simulator. So I think try going out in an aircraft or try and doing it in VR and see if that improves it. It improves your ability to turn to final. But a key part is just make sure you're coordinated. And again, that's something that's easier to do in the real world because you've got that seat of your pants feeling. You can feel if you're getting pulled or pushed to the outside or the inside. If you feel like you're being pulled straight down, that's good. And it's easy to notice that in a real airplane. And it's easy to move your head in a real airplane. And so it's just one of the drawbacks of a simulator. But yeah, if you overshoot the runway, if you have like a good amount of distance between you and the runway, you can correct. Otherwise, yeah, just go around. I mean, that's more flight time, right? Darn. I'm happy to fly some more if you are.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Cool. Well, if there's no other questions, my call. If there's anybody else sticking around, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate it. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. See ya.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening, Monty. See you next week.
Monty, thank you.
Yeah, guys. See ya.